Why are you ignoring me? I've decided not to speak to strangers. I understand. I'll leave. But living with my in-laws, they completely ignore me. I accepted it from my mother-in-law, but I never imagined my father-in-law would treat me like this. There was a reason why the in-laws, who were once kind, had changed. It was because of my sister-in-law, who disliked me returning home. Thus, with her arrival, our peaceful life together was completely upended. Don't regret it, okay? You think I'm going to regret this? Think again, jerk. I packed my bags and left my in-laws his house. Sure enough, just 3 days after I left, chaos broke out in their household. I met my husband at my workplace. He was in sales and frequently visited my office, and I was his main contact. Except we spent more time in meetings and discussions. I grew fond of him, a caring and kind man. Oh, and not necessarily what you'd call handsome, but maybe what you'd describe as having a charismatic vibe. He was popular, but for some reason, he said he liked me, and we began dating. When we talked, he mentioned he had grown up in a typical family with parents and a sister. I lost my parents in an accident when I was young and grew up in an orphanage. It was a complex issue for me, but when we started dating, I quickly shared my background with him. And he responded, "That must have been tough, but don't worry. I'll always be there for you." Soon after, he proposed. From the beginning, my husband intended our relationship to head towards marriage and quickly introduced me to his parents. During the introduction, I told them about growing up in the orphanage. They listened attentively and reassured me that it wouldn't matter in our marriage. It made me very happy. Besides, they told me that being raised in an orphanage had nothing to do with being their daughter-in-law, which truly made me happy. Only my sister-in-law, being very attached to her brother, seemed taken aback, asking, "You grew up in an orphanage?" My husband had to reprimand her. In retrospect, she probably disliked me from our first meeting. I didn't give it much thought at that time, thinking we had just met. But before our marriage, my husband and I discussed moving in with his parents. I seriously considered it, but in the end, I decided not to quit my job. Turns out, my husband was set to be transferred soon. I thought about quitting my job to move with him, but my career was going well and I had just been given direct reports. We discussed it and decided he would move on his own. After getting married, I wanted to savor that newlywed feeling for a bit. I even casually thought about visiting my husband during the long weekends for a little vacation feel. It's the idea of moving in with the in-laws so soon after marriage was a bit daunting, but my husband probably felt more at ease living with his parents. Plus, to put his ever-worried mother at ease, he probably wanted us to live together. Having lost my parents at a young age, I'd always yearned for a family, so living with them wasn't an entirely unappealing idea. Plus, my in-laws had always treated me kindly, and I had grown fond of them. Balancing work and my duties as a daughter-in-law was challenging, but having a family made me happy and fulfilled. One day, my father-in-law approached me with an unexpected request. This would mark the beginning of the unraveling of our seemingly happy cohabitation. It was a time when my overly anxious mother-in-law, who tended to act domineering towards my father-in-law, was out shopping. Up in feel, I was about to start cleaning on my day off when my father-in-law asked to speak with me. This would mark the beginning of the unraveling of our seemingly happy cohabitation. "What's the matter?" I asked. "Well, I don't want my wife to know, but I'm taking a leave from work." "Wait, a leave?" I said, surprised. He explained that he had been having problems with his boss and coworkers, and his health had deteriorated to the point where he had no choice but to take a leave. My mother-in-law is a good person, but she's always anxious and a bit neurotic. With them, I came to realize her neurotic tendencies and how my father-in-law tiptoed around her to avoid upsetting her. He had always been on the slimmer side, but now that I think about it, he did seem to have lost some weight recently. It would be nice if the mother-in-law was the type to genuinely worry about my father-in-law's weight loss. However, when he had previously taken a sick day due to a cold, she remarked, "A cold. All of your colleagues are at executive levels by now. It's because you're always taking days off, claiming bad health or colds. That's why you don't get promoted." Rather than showing concern, she was the kind to give him a hard time. He probably tried his best to push through, no matter how poor his health was. However, his condition worsened, and he secretly took multiple sick days to visit the hospital. He was both mentally and physically at his limit. With his frequent early departures, tardiness, and absences, there was talk of him possibly taking a temporary leave from work. But my father-in-law didn't want to upset my mother-in-law under any circumstances. If he were to suggest taking a leave of absence, it's obvious that she would explode in anger. Besides, my father-in-law's salary wasn't that great, and he depended on his overtime pay. So taking a leave would mean he'd be making significantly less. If he told my husband, he'd probably end up telling my mother-in-law. So he approached me, asking if I could help with the living expenses. If I suggest taking a leave, she might even divorce me. Hearing those words from him felt like a punch to the gut. I deeply appreciated my in-laws, who had warmly welcomed me without discriminating against my background of being raised in an institution. Determined to be supportive, I made up my mind to help him out during this tough time. And understood, I'll transfer money into your account every month. Please use it for living expenses. I'm truly sorry. I'll do my best to recover quickly and return to work. Thank you so much. After that, my father-in-law pretended to go to work as usual while I transferred money into his bank account, which he used for living expenses. My mother-in-law, being rather carefree, didn't meticulously check her bank statements or maintain a household ledger, so she never noticed my transfers. Pretending to go to work, he would visit a mental clinic or take walks in the serene mountains. Gradually, his complexion seemed to improve. I thought he might be returning to work soon, but then an unexpected event occurred. After a marital spat, my sister-in-law returned to her parental home.
Ah, there's nothing like being home. I thought I'd go crazy if I had to stay with that idiot husband of mine. I'll be staying here for a while.
Please prepare meals for me too. I was well aware from our first meeting that my sister-in-law didn't like me. During our family's first meeting, my husband was really upset because she was visibly displeased. During the wedding, she maintained a sour expression throughout and even told me point blank, "My brother looks so good, but it would have been better if he married someone prettier." And she openly looked down on me, raised in an institution, saying it was embarrassing that I didn't have parents to present at the wedding. However, she got married earlier than US and had already moved out, so I thought our interactions would be limited. That's why I thought living with them would be okay. If she'd have been living at home, I wouldn't have even considered moving in, knowing the daily jibes I would receive. Still, I thought this visit was just temporary due to her marital problems and expected her to leave within a few days. Despite her stern behavior towards my father-in-law, my mother-in-law was never harsh towards me. And even if my sister-in-law had made snide comments, I believed my mother-in-law would have defended me. But I was wrong. One day when I returned from work, something seemed off about my mother-in-law's behavior. It's something wrong. She seemed distant, not engaging in her usual conversation. When I asked, she responded, "Did you know you've been bad-mouthing me behind my back?" What? I've never said anything bad about you. You've always been kind to me, and I'm truly grateful. Why would I badmouth you? You've been playing the good daughter-in-law card all this time, but you've been badmouthing me on the side. Fine, whatever.
Looks like you've fallen out of favor. Did your true colors show? Being raised in an institution, your background really does show, huh? It's better not to badmouth people, you know.
I haven't said anything bad about her. Oh, the neighbors seem to have heard it. After I returned home after such a long time, they told me that you've been constantly criticizing her. What? Who are these neighbors? Look, it's been a while since I got married and moved out, so I've kind of forgotten the names of the neighbors. I've never said any of those things. Stop making things up. Oh my, how rude. None. She's calling me a liar and bullying me. Saying this, she entered my mother-in-law's room. After that, my sister-in-law's malicious behavior escalated. She claimed I told her to sleep in the corridor and take the last bath because she's just a lodger. She'd complained to my mother-in-law about every little thing. Every time, I had to explain that I hadn't said or done any such thing. However, my mother-in-law seemed to be completely taken in by my sister-in-law's words and seemed to be under her influence. My sister-in-law continued her stay, making me wonder if she intended to stay indefinitely. But with these worries, I headed home with a heavy heart. And so, previously my mother-in-law would cheerfully greet me with, "Welcome back." Now there's silence. I'll get dinner ready. Surprised, my sister-in-law said, "It looks like someone who isn't family is home. You're not thinking of having sushi, are you?" Without even glancing at me, my mother-in-law continued eating while watching TV. "If you wanted sushi, You should have said so. I rushed home after shopping. Huh? No one asked for that? Hey, Mom, Dad, I went out with my friends during the day and got some delicious pudding. Let's eat together. Bex, as my sister-in-law said, that without paying any mind to me, the three of them started eating the pudding. I was exhausted from work and didn't have the energy to get upset, so I went to my room without eating. The next day, my sister-in-law said she was going out with friends and asked me to drive her to the station. I obviously declined since it was a weekday and I had work. Even if we were headed in the same direction, I wouldn't have driven her because of her behavior. Even if we were headed in the same direction, it would be a completely different route, and she wanted to leave close to noon. There's no way I could take her. Just take a day off. It's fine. Her cute little sister-in-law just wants a ride. She never had the chance to relax and hang out after she got married, right? Can't you be a bit kinder to her now? With all due respect, didn't you go out with friends last night after getting a late-night call? It seems like you've been going out almost every day since you came home. I have work. Please take the bus or train. I never liked you from the beginning, being raised in an institution and all. Facing often regretting his family's behavior towards me, of course, he told me I don't have to go back to his parents' house or even speak to them. Even if I ever forgave them, he was adamant about cutting ties with his parents and sister. He also promised not to provide any financial aid to his father anymore. That night, I felt truly relieved. The tension I had been holding melted away, and I had a peaceful sleep by his side. After that, I never returned to my in-laws' house. While commuting from my husband's out-of-state place was not feasible, I had already approached my company about working remotely since my sister-in-law and mother-in-law started treating me harshly. My job doesn't necessarily require being in the office, and many of my colleagues and superiors also work remotely. While I have to visit the office a few times a month, several colleagues live even further away, so switching to remote work wasn't a problem. I hadn't truly experienced married life since moving in with his family and dealing with my sister-in-law's bullying, but now we could finally live like newlyweds. As I was setting up my remote workstation, predictably, my sister-in-law contacted me. It turned out the day after I left their house was the day my father-in-law was supposed to get paid. My mother-in-law usually withdraws a certain amount and transfers it to their household account on payday, but this time she couldn't. Of course not. Until now, I had been supplementing my father-in-law's reduced salary due to his time off. Upon checking their balance, my mother-in-law confronted him and he confessed that I had been helping them financially. Hey, why didn't you tell me you were covering the living expenses? He told me not to, saying he didn't want you to know. So I kept it a secret. Had to be anyway, we're running out of money for living expenses, and there's no one to cook or do laundry. The room is a mess. As his wife, you need to come back and take care of these things and transfer money quickly. How heartless, I told her. I have no intention of going back to that house or continuing as your maid. But why should I help people who hate me, destroy my belongings, and treat me like this? Aren't you his wife? Without your help, we can't pay the electricity or gas bills. We can't even go shopping. That's why I said it. I'm an outsider, so it's none of my business. I hung up, ignoring my sister-in-law's ranting. She and my mother-in-law kept pestering me with calls and messages, but I ignored all of them. Even after my husband returned from work, the persistent calls from them continued.
I'll never let you treat her like that again.
We are done with this toxic relationship. I'll never forgive you for how you treated her, and I'm never sending her back to you. And not coming back either. I don't consider you my family anymore. Stay away from my wife, or you'll regret it. Given that my sister-in-law adored her brother, and my mother-in-law heavily relied on him, they were probably in shock. A few days later, I received a call from my father-in-law.
He said living with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law was becoming unbearable, and he begged me to continue the financial assistance.
I'm still grateful for them accepting me, who grew up in an orphanage when they married. They didn't support me in my time of need. Despite all the financial help I've provided, I don't owe them anything. Why should I help those who joined others in ignoring me? I'll never assist you again. He doesn't seem to get why I'm silent. It's too late for him to be trying to talk to me now. He should realize it's all because he ignored me. Well, if he had understood that, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. Fine. If he doesn't get it, I'll make him understand. I never intended to forgive him anyway, so this is perfect. I'll teach him a proper lesson. I stared at Bob, snorted with a smirk, and then closed the front door. My name is Catherine Miller. About a year ago, I married my husband, Bob. When we got married, I was 30, so I've been with my maiden name, Thompson, for 30 years. That's why at first, it felt a bit strange being called Mrs. Miller. But now, being addressed as Mrs. Miller feels more frustrating than strange. You see, things haven't been going well with Bob. Hey, what do you want to eat tonight? I tried asking Bob at breakfast, but there was no response. He just glanced at me briefly and then went back to his smartphone. Sigh, he's not talking to me today either. Lately, Bob's been like this all the time. Even when I try to start a conversation, he doesn't respond or answer my important questions. It's because of this ongoing situation that every time I'm called Mrs. Miller, I'm sharply reminded of our marriage, and it frustrates me. I can't take this lifestyle much longer. I've been thinking that more and more. Of course, Bob wasn't always this reserved. He used to be kind and cheerful. I first met Bob during his company's corporate trip. I was working for a travel agency at the time, serving as the tour guide for his company outing. That's when we crossed paths. Bob was having a great time with his colleagues. Moreover, he was considerate towards me, their tour guide. Would you like to join us? I'm sorry, I'm on duty right now. Doesn't being a guide for a middle or high school field trip often means paying close attention to many details. But in this case, the group was all adults. Nobody was being problematic or hard to manage. Still, it wouldn't have been professional for me to just ditch my responsibilities and have fun with the group. In the end, I declined Bob's invitation and focused on my job. I wondered later if I had made a mistake. However, at the end of the tour, Bob told me this: "How about we go out sometime? I'd love to see more of your smile." It took me by surprise. Being a guide, you do get approached often. But nobody had ever been this earnest with me before. "All right, let's just exchange contact information for now," I said. I was so thrilled. That was the best response I could muster. We exchanged numbers with my heart racing like a schoolgirl. After that, we started dating and then got married. After that, we started communicating more and eventually started dating, and that led to our marriage a year ago. Looking back now, I feel our days before marriage might have been better. Once we got married, I began to see sides of him I didn't like. "You left your clothes out again." "Huh, what are you talking about?"
I picked up the suit you left on the sofa.
"Bob," I said, "don't leave it on the sofa. Put it in the closet."
Oh, he responded with a chuckle.
It just infuriated me even more. Ugh, he's just like a child. Just leaves his clothes everywhere, drops his stuff around the house, and no matter how many times I point it out, Bob just apologizes on the spot and does the same thing the next day. And it felt like it was getting worse day by day. After our marriage, these irritating habits of Bob became more and more noticeable. Apparently, Bob felt the same about some of my habits. Getting to roam late night when I returned home after work, he yelled at me, "Catherine, there's a pile of laundry. Are you washing anything?" "Yeah, sorry. I'll get to it right away," I replied. It's our peak season, and I've been swamped at work. It was during the spring break, and our travel agency was in the middle of its busiest period. There were many trip bookings, and the workload had increased. It's the most lucrative time for a travel agency. So yes, I had been neglecting the housework. I felt bad about it. But I explained to Bob that this was only temporary and things would settle down soon. "Just making excuses to be lazy," he said condescendingly. "It's not an excuse," I retorted. "Your company has busy seasons too, right? So what? If it interferes with the housework, maybe you should just quit your job. You're my wife after all."
Bob said condescendingly.
At that moment, I was infuriated. I couldn't help but raise my voice in response. "What's that supposed to mean? I work too. Shouldn't you be helping with the housework? Why should I do housework? Isn't that the wife's job?" I confronted Bob, but he just turned away.
Then, in a sulking tone, he said, "Whose chores have always been the wife's job, haven't you knew that before we got married?"
Things have changed. 3 couples work together now. Even though I said this, Bob acted as if he hadn't heard. Eventually, our argument escalated and we slowly stopped talking. A few days later, when I came home, I heard Bob's voice from inside the house. "Huh, is someone over?" I cautiously entered the living room and met eyes with my mother-in-law in the kitchen. "Oh, welcome back. Hi, why are you here?" Well, she sighed before continuing. The story dated back a few hours. As she was preparing dinner, Bob had suddenly called her. "Mom, I need your help. Catherine won't do any housework." "What? Catherine?" She keeps saying it's her busy season, so she's slacking off. "I can't even get a decent meal." He apparently said. Of course, that was a big lie. "Sure, because it's a busy season, I might not be on top of all the chores. I might do laundry for 2 days in one go, but I do prepare meals and handle the basic chores." So I defended myself confidently. "I sometimes use meal kits, but I still cook the meals myself." Bob interrupted. "What's a meal kit? Sounds like a shortcut to me. I might have prepped ingredients, but I still cook everything from scratch. It's still cutting corners." Bob raised his voice, and his mother stepped in between us. After calming Bob down, she turned to me and said, "Anyway, it seems you have been struggling, so I came to help with the chores." "I see. I'm sorry. Don't worry about it. I bet Bob's just exaggerating." She glanced at Bob, who looked away, clearly unhappy. "Bob's been complaining, so I'll help with chores during your busy season." With that said, Bob started devouring the food on the table. His expertise. Soon after finishing, he promptly retreated to his room. While watching his retreating figure, the mother-in-law turned to me and said, "I'm sorry, Catherine." "What? Why? About Bob? He's probably not doing much around the house, is he?" All I could do was give a wry smile when my mother-in-law said that. Seeming to understand my feelings, she continued, "Bob probably called me over just to spite you." "To spite me?" As I asked for clarification, she sighed before answering. From her perspective, Bob was frustrated with you for cutting corners with the chores while ignoring his own flaws. To get back at you, he probably called her over. He's thinking that if she came, you'd have no choice but to do the housework properly. No matter how busy you were, you wouldn't be able to slack off. Moreover, she would surely scold you for not doing enough. That's what she guessed Bob was thinking. But contrary to his expectations, my mother-in-law showed understanding towards me. Not only that, she actually blamed Bob. This didn't sit well with Bob at all, so he's been sulking. She said, "But what should I do?" "Just leave him be. He's not a child." She laughed off the matter, but things wouldn't be so easy. But from that day onwards, Bob stopped talking to me altogether. He wouldn't reply, no matter what I said. He'd even turn away from me. At first, I thought he'd give up soon, but no matter how much time passed, Bob didn't seem to want to speak. And like that, days turned into more days. Eventually, a week passed, and before I knew it, half a year had gone by. By that time, I had truly reached my limit. I thought, this isn't a marriage anymore, is it? Feeling this way, I decided to file for divorce. After work, I went to a lawyer's office. Then, on a particular weekend morning, I left the divorce attorney's business card on the table and went back to my parents' house. But to say I held no grudge against Bob would be a lie, but I didn't want revenge or anything like that. If I got some alimony, that would be fine. That's what I thought. But shortly after, an event occurred that completely flipped my emotions upside down. It happened a week after I left the house. In the middle of the day on a weekend, someone unexpectedly came visiting. That uppertakens to house to refrigerate from Markran, as to the doors answered the door, calling out, "May I help you?" to the silhouette standing in front of the entrance. Wondering who it could be, I opened the door slightly. The moment I peeked outside, I was taken aback. It was Bob standing there, looking intently at me with a tight line for a mouth. I immediately shut my mouth. Suddenly, Bob raised his voice and asked, "What are you doing here?" I was stunned by his outburst. Why is Bob angry? I thought, after all the silent treatment, I'm the one who should be mad. Such feelings overflowed within me, and at the same time, anger swelled up. Oh, doesn't Bob realize I'm mad? To take it from me, actually, I wondered. Well, if he doesn't, I'll make him understand. I decided to express my anger silently. Enough already, I almost retorted, but I held back those words. How long are you going to stay away? The house is a mess. Just come back already. Since I kept quiet, Bob continued his tirade. If you won't come back, let's just get divorced. I don't need a wife who can't even do household chores. All I could do was sigh at Bob's harsh words. He doesn't even realize why I'm silent. It's too late to talk to me now. Realize that all of this is because you ignored me. Well, if he had realized it, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. It's fine, I'll make him understand. I never intended to forgive him anyway. I'll make sure he pays for his mistakes. After glaring at Bob, I snorted in derision and shut the door. Hey, Catherine. Don't ignore me. Bob tried to forcefully open the door. I held the door firmly, staying silent. Stop kidding around. Come back now? It was when Bob said that. Noticing the commotion, my father rushed out from the living room. Dad, please help, whispered, asking for his help. My father took my place and confronted Bob outside. What do you want? Bob flinched at my father's stern tone. Soon, Bob started to look evasive and began making excuses. Catherine hasn't come home and she left all the chores behind, so I've heard all about it. This is your fault, isn't it? No, I didn't really. Bob looked more flustered. My father, pushing him into a corner, told him, You haven't been talking to Catherine, have you? And you came to pick her up. How can you even say that? Well, by not talking to her, you essentially gave up on your relationship. It's too late for regrets now. Bob jumped at my father's booming voice. Bob quickly distanced himself from my father and pointed at me. I'll forgive you now. At your age, you won't have many chances left after a divorce. I'll bark and no bite. That's the phrase that came to mind. He looked that pathetic. I sighed and retreated further inside the house. You'll regret this.
Was so loud I could hear him clearly inside.
Shortly after, my father returned. Where's Bob?
He ran off.
So what are you gonna do? I initially planned to leave him be, but I've changed my mind. I'll teach him a lesson and make him truly regret it. I was determined. I was about to contact a lawyer. That's when my phone rang. Huh? The call from Bob? I guess he switched to calling since I ignored him. However, my intention to not talk to him remained. I ignored the call. Ended shortly after. He seems to have given up. Just as I murmured that, the phone rang again and again after that. The calls just wouldn't stop coming in, so persistent. I might as well block him. I blocked Bob's number. I knew he'd figure it out soon, but I didn't care. If he gets the message that I want to ignore him forever, that's enough. That's what I thought. After that, I don't know if Bob realized he was blocked. But he didn't come to the house. And for that, I was relieved. And the next day, I went to work as usual. Besides, on the way home, I figured I'd stop by the lawyer's office to discuss the next steps. That's what I was thinking while working. Lunch break rolled around, and I stepped out of the office to grab a bite. As I was heading out, a voice called out to me, "Catherine, I've been waiting for you." Turning toward the voice, it was Bob. I was taken aback and blurted out, "Why are you here, Bob?" "Catherine, why haven't you come back? You don't answer calls. What the hell are you thinking?" Bob ranted loudly, drawing attention. I got flustered. "Hey, don't make a scene here. You ignore me in person and over the phone. What choice do I have?" He raised his voice, clearly agitated. Up by now, I was getting really annoyed. Plus, all he ever thinks about is himself. Even though this whole mess started because he decided to give me the cold shoulder, I wonder how I could get through to him. Just as I was pondering this, a colleague named Paul emerged from the office. Paul is a male coworker. He's been hitting the gym, and it shows.
Everything okay?
I managed a rueful smile, replying, "It's a little complicated."
Stare at that bomb said you have business with one of our employees?
Mind your own business. This is between a husband and wife, Bob said, looking all high and mighty. A chink is a person. I shook my head. Suddenly, Bob yelled, "Catherine, stop lying." "We're married, aren't we?" "No, we're not," I said. "But complete strangers." I snapped back. His face turned beet red with anger. "That's a lie," Bob exclaimed. "We got married a year ago, and we've been living together ever since." Look Humphrey spapped out, but began his rant, looking all high and mighty. I was looking at him with disbelief. Just waiting for him to finish, I finally interrupted. "On with your tall tale?" I asked. "Well, where's the punchline about us being divorced?" "About us being divorced." Bob looked stunned at my remark. Seeing his expression, I teasingly said, "Oh, did you forget that you signed the divorce papers from my attorney?" "What are you talking about?" Bob asked in disbelief, so I began to recount the events after leaving our home. The day after I left our home, divorce papers were sent to Bob. He might sign it or he might not. Either way, I thought it was fine. But a few days later, there was a twist. My mother-in-law visited me. Apparently, Bob had asked her to handle the household chores in my absence. She urgently asked about the legal papers. When I told her how Bob had been ignoring me, she became furious. To then, she pulled out the divorce papers. "I did sign these," she said, urging me to submit them right away. And so, with my lawyer's assistance, the divorce was finalized. And just like that, we were officially divorced.
I never wanted a divorce. So then why'd you sign the papers? I was drunk when I did. Bob started making excuses. I was drunk and just signed it for fun. I never really intended divorce.
It was just a game. He went on with his excuses. But once you sign the divorce papers, there's no way those excuses will fly. You really expect anyone to believe that? I asked in disbelief. But I shut it. We're already divorced. I snapped at him. If you say one more thing, I'll call the police. I warned him. Bob looked down, biting his lip like a child. Just go away, I told him off. Bob turned his back and murmured, "You'll regret this. That's my line," I said, and Bob then scurried away. Surely he's learned his lesson by now. We're officially divorced, and he's the one who signed the papers. He can't object now. I couldn't help but laugh. Later, I thanked Paul by inviting him for lunch. We had an unexpectedly great conversation. After work, I headed to the attorney's office. But then a problem surfaced. Bob might not agree to discuss it.
We'll do everything we can, the female lawyer reassured me.
But if Bob tries to approach me again, it'll be a nightmare. I emphasized this to the attorney.
My job was done.
All I had to do now was trust the attorney. I headed home, relieved. But days went by without any contact from the lawyer's office. It's instead something else arrived at my place, about 10 days after visiting the attorney, when my distraught father approached me. He handed me an envelope that read personal identification notification. I opened it and my face turned pale. A marriage application? I immediately called the attorney, explaining the situation.
It means someone submitted a marriage application without your consent.
Epically, both parties go to the county clerk's office to submit a marriage application.
But one person can submit it too. In that case, the local authority notifies the absent party.
This is to ensure that the marriage application isn't submitted without the other's knowledge. There's only one person who'd do this. It has to be Bob. As infuriated, I reported the matter to the police through my attorney and sought advice.
If you file for a marriage annulment mediation, it seems like a hassle, but it's the only way.
I had the lawyer start on it immediately. At the same time, I reached out to my mother-in-law, thinking it'd be pointless to contact Bob. Well, the thing is, I explained everything to her, and as expected, she was livid. "Bob, get over here." I could hear her yelling at him over the phone, followed by Bob's crying. "It wasn't what you think. I did it for Catherine." "What are you on about? What you did is a crime. You realize that?" But he began to wail pathetically. It was unbearable to hear, so I hung up. Detectives. The next day, led by his mother, Bob showed up at the attorney's office. As soon as he entered the office, he immediately apologized. "I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." "Excuse me? There's no way I'm forgiving this. But I did it for Catherine." He started with the same excuse. So I told him submitting a fake marriage registration can be considered forging an official document. You know, of course, that's just a possibility. It's uncertain if he'd actually be charged with a crime. But as a threat, it worked wonders. Pop apologized again. I'm sorry. Please, I don't want to go to jail. Too bad. Reflect on what you did. At that, Bob broke down in tears. Later on, in court, Bob confessed to forging the marriage certificate. I assume he testified that way, hoping to get leniency. However, life isn't that easy. Although he wasn't prosecuted, it didn't change the fact that he committed a crime. But in the end, Bob lost his job and became an outcast in the community. Pepper people saw him in public. They whispered behind his back. But unable to take the ostracism, he moved to a small town. At take now, he's scraping by, working part-time in a warehouse. Well, I'm not ready to think about remarrying. I do want a fulfilling personal life. These things with Paul are looking pretty good, to be honest. If and when I feel ready to move on from the divorce, I'll think positively about it. You can't even cook a meal. You trash, go freeze in the backyard. With that, James shut the window and locked it. I immediately ran to the window. Please, open it, I begged as I pounded on the window, but James just grinned and drew the curtains. I began to shiver from the cold. It could feel my body, which had been warmed by the heater until just a moment ago, rapidly losing its warmth. What am I gonna do? If it continues this way, even my baby inside me will be in danger. Just as I was on the verge of passing out from the intense cold and shock, a savior extended a hand to me and asked, "Are you okay?" The next day, I returned home with them. In the yard, James was freezing naked. When I was staring in shock at the sight, Liam stepped forward.
He said to James, that was what you said, wasn't it? If you can't even cook properly, then freeze outside. James, shivering in the yard, couldn't even reply properly. I'll call an ambulance out of the goodness of my heart, Emily. Do you want to say anything to him before it arrives?
Nodding in response to his words, I took a step closer to James. I said, "My name is Emily Smith. I'm a 28-year-old homemaker. My mother passed away due to an illness shortly after I started working. My father, following her, suddenly died of a heart attack. Being an only child, I was left completely alone. The loneliness was unbearable, but I distracted myself by immersing myself in work. Emily, are you okay? You seem to be pushing yourself." But the one who reached out to me during that time was my husband, James. He had a way of comforting my grieving heart, always there to support me when I was crying alone. Then, once I had somewhat recovered, he pursued a relationship. And after dating for a few years, we got married. "Wow, we're so pleased to have such a lovely young woman join our family," he said. Yes, for James, he's brought home quite a nice young lady, his mother agreed. After our wedding, I started living with James' family. We got along very well. Well, Emily, I saw on TV the other day that there's a new calf near the train station. Let's go together sometime. Yes, I'd love to. I particularly hit it off with my mother-in-law, and we go out for a meal together once a week. I also get along well with my father-in-law, who loves to cook, and we've cooked together in the kitchen several times. I'm glad you're getting along with my family. Though, not at all. It's true that I don't talk much with Liam, my brother-in-law. Since he works from home, he often stays in his room. Oh, but I was interested in his work, and when I asked about it, he explained it to me in detail. So I've been getting along well with James' family. A few years after we got married, I became pregnant with James's child. Given the severity of my morning sickness, I decided to quit my job. I think that's a good idea. Yet don't push yourself. This wasn't just my decision. I discussed it thoroughly with James' family. In fact, the earnings of both James and Liam are enough for us to live on, and I also have savings. Besides, my father-in-law works, and my mother-in-law has a part-time job, so there's no problem with me quitting. And pregnant women have it good. They don't have to work and no one complains. But lately, though, James has been complaining about this. James was also present during score discussions, and at the time he was the first to suggest I should quit. Just a freeloader without a job, acting oh high and mighty. Who's acting high and mighty? When did I ever order you around? I'm the one cleaning up the clothes you leave around, you know. That being said, I've always been a competitive person, and I would always prove James wrong. You should have spoken up during our discussions if you had complaints. Exactly. It was you who brought it up, James. Right. Instead of complaining, take care of your own responsibilities. Because my parents-in-law agree with me and side with me, James feels isolated. Liam and James don't get along very well, so Liam never takes James' side. James looks down on me because I work from home. He doesn't listen to me and doesn't consider me a help at all. That's what Liam murmured. That's why Liam doesn't even join such conversations. James doesn't like the situation, and when we're alone, he complains even more. Just because my family likes you doesn't mean you should get too cocky. I'm not getting cocky. Everyone is just being reasonable. Even if it were just the two of us, I never lost to James. But once the morning sickness kicked in, I lost the energy to even argue. Pregnancy isn't an illness. If you're not working, you're no different from a bomb. I agree, it's not a disease. Pregnancy isn't an illness, but it's not a picnic either. It's a lot of work, and I'm tired all the time. But Emily is risking her life to nurture another. That's work in itself. Then Liam stepped in to help whenever James complained to me. Liam would immediately come to my aid and report to his parents. While James was being scolded by his parents, Liam took care of me. At this rate, it's hard to tell who the real father is. I muttered, rubbing my belly. Though, with my in-laws keeping an eye on things, I hoped James would change eventually. Until that time, I trusted James. Oh, James hasn't returned yet, seems like it. Then, all of a sudden, James started coming home late. He said it was due to overtime, but I wasn't sure if that was true. Even on his days off, he was like, got called in to work. I'm busy, so I'm gonna stay at the office. Sometimes, he didn't return home at all. Honestly, I started to suspect James was cheating. So did his parents. We tried to gather evidence together, but it was hard to catch him in the act. He only seemed to be at the office, and there was no sign of any particular woman. Well, we can't really know what's going on inside the company. I asked one of the junior employees, but she said there's nothing unusual. Oh, hey, Emily, don't push yourself. Just around that time, my morning sickness got so severe that I couldn't do any household chores. But my father-in-law took care of the cooking, and my mother-in-law handled the other chores. Liam also pitched in, so everything was fine. Thought you ashamed? Lying around all day, not doing any housework, even though you're a homemaker. What's the point of you even being here? James, having seen his parents doing the housework, woke me up in the middle of the night just to say that.
That's not something someone who's not doing his part as a husband should be saying.
Every single time, you defy me even though I'm the eldest. Well, you're not exactly the kind of brother I can look up to. You've always been such a smartass. The argument between the brothers escalated, and just before it turned into a physical fight, the commotion was heard by their parents, who intervened to stop them. After hearing the situation, they scolded James. That's enough. Do whatever you want. Wait, James. Where are you going? Without answering me, James left. I'm really sorry about that fool. I truly apologize. Just in place of James, they apologized to me and the matter was settled there. However, James's attitude has been getting worse. Something needs to be done soon. I was at a loss for what to do. What should I do? Is everything all right? One Saturday, my mother-in-law and father-in-law had plans to travel for a local event. They had arranged this trip in advance, but they seemed concerned about James's recent behavior. I'm worried about leaving you behind. I'm fine. My morning sickness has settled down quite a bit. Even they were quite conceited. I saw them off with a smile, and they headed off on a 3-day trip. Just around the same time, Liam had some overnight commitments. I'm sorry for leaving during such a time. Don't worry about it. Take care and be safe. Not long after my mother-in-law and father-in-law left, Liam departed as well. That day, unusually, James was home, though he was still asleep. I got up. Honestly, I was not feeling my best. But if I just lay around doing nothing, I didn't know what James might say. Thankfully, there were plenty of dishes that my father-in-law had prepped and stored in the fridge. I began cleaning and doing laundry, taking it slow and easy on my feet. Hey, breakfast. Oh, just woke up? James finally got up close to noon. Just with his hair still tousled and a grumpy look on his face, he demanded breakfast. I rolled my eyes and pulled some leftovers from the fridge. What's that? Tom, you mean the leftovers your father made? Like, you, being a homemaker, can't even cook? That remark irked me. Why do I have to hear this? Does he not realize I'm carrying his child? There's no justification for such a comment. Sorry, right now my job is to take care of my baby in my belly. Health care has been on the back burner. How dare you talk like that to your husband? Just as James shouted at me, the door was flung open with a bang. Standing there was Liam. I could hear shouting all the way outside. "You shut in." James shot Liam a dirty look and headed back into his room, murmuring some curse words under his breath. Just as I thought James had left the house, he seemed to leave the house. Liam sighed heavily. "You okay?" "Yeah. What brought you here?" Poor Lieutenant, I came to pick up something I forgot." Saying that, Liam looked at me with a worried expression. I chuckled, thinking how much he resembled his mother. "It's okay, you know. Go on, be on your way." "I'll be going then." Liam looked back at me hesitantly before finally leaving. I wondered, where did the James I first met back then go? At this rate, a divorce, but I still want to be family with my in-laws, and with feeling suddenly exhausted, I decided to lie down. And as I closed my eyes, I drifted into a deep sleep. Emily, time to wake up. As I hurriedly sat up, I met James's eyes, which were giving me a wry smile. I must have dozed off completely. I'm gonna get an earful from James again. Just as I was on the verge of passing out from the intense cold and shock, a savior extended a hand to me and asked, "Are you okay?" He immediately put me in the car. "Why are you out here at this time of night?" The one who helped me was Liam. Liam had been worried about James, so he came home earlier than planned. The car's heater warmed me up, and I sighed in relief. As Liam suggested, we should go to the hospital just in case. He drove me to the hospital. Thanks to Liam's quick response, fortunately, both my baby and I were fine. And while I was being examined, Liam had apparently arranged for a hotel. We were able to stay at the hotel, but Liam left and went somewhere else. I'm so relieved. You're going to be a strong baby, aren't you? Feeling reassured that I've arrived at the hotel, I rubbed my belly. I was so glad nothing happened. I was exhausted, so as soon as I lay down on the bed, I fell asleep. Though, Emily, are you okay now? Yes, completely. Thank you so much. Shall we go? The next day, I returned home with him. In the yard, James was freezing naked. Hutchins, when I was staring in shock at the sight, Liam stepped forward. Liam spoke to James with a cold Gießen tone. James, shivering in the yard, couldn't even reply properly. As Liam declared, "I'll call an ambulance out of the goodness of my heart. Emily, you want to say anything to him before it arrives?" Adding in response to his words, I took a step closer to James. "It's because of you that our baby was almost in grave danger. I will never forgive you." Then James was taken to the hospital, and he asked Liam what had happened last night. After dropping me off at the hotel, Liam sneaked back home alone. At home, he found James sleeping in the living room stripped down, and a woman who appeared to be his mistress was there as well. He brought his mistress home thinking we wouldn't be around, and with you locked out, he seemed pretty confident. Liam, burning with rage, apparently threw James out of the house in his birthday suit. Now see who's the real trash. Think about it all night. He then grilled the shocked mistress for information, got evidence, and forcibly sent her back to her place. It turns out she also had a family, and by the time he informed them of everything, dawn was approaching. He took a short nap in the car and then came to pick me up. That's how it all went down. I've spoken to my parents. They said they're going to come home today. He told me with a gentle smile and stayed by my side until they returned. It's gonna be okay now, Liam. Thank you so much. Nah, I just did what had to be done. Thanks to him, I could feel safe at home. Emily, I'm so sorry. That idiot, I can't apologize enough. They apologized immediately upon their return and went straight to giving James a piece of their mind. James was forced to pay child support and was then decided to be kicked out. I'm so sorry. It was just a lapse in judgment. Emily, I truly love only you. But as James clung to me, I ignored him. As if it's just me. I wish he'd stop taking me for a fool. Don't look at me like that. Suddenly, James flared up, raising his hand at me. Enough is enough. My damn son. Liam grabbed and twisted James's arm. But with the intervention of my father-in-law, James was easily overpowered. Emily, I really just lost my mind for a moment. Emily, I really just lost my mind for a moment. Emily, I watched him being thrown out by the two men, all the while being held by my mother-in-law. He was pathetic until the very end. As for James, that's all I ever thought. By the way, Liam's pretty strong, isn't he? But considering what just happened and the way he tossed a full-grown man outside, I was genuinely surprised by Liam's strength. Oh yeah, he used to do combat sport back in the day. I definitely wouldn't use a move on an amateur though. Liam, who had returned, said this with a refreshing smile. I couldn't help but feel a flutter in my heart at his smile, and my mother-in-law laughed upon noticing. He's with such good looks and strength, it's almost surprising he doesn't have a girlfriend. Oh, hush. Seeing him look away bashfully after my mother-in-law's remark, I couldn't help but find it endearing. From then on, I decided to stay and be cared for in my in-laws' home since I had no family or reliable person to turn to. If you'd allow, I'd love to hold your baby. Of course, anytime. Right now, the four of us are eagerly awaiting the birth of my precious baby. Upon talking to Liam, it turns out that James's affair was with a junior from his office. No wonder she wouldn't spill the beans when asked. The two of them were sneaking around and getting cozy at various spots. At Popples, once I reported it to the junior's husband, he did a thorough investigation. That evidence, my divorce process went smoothly. Both of them got fired for fooling around during work hours and for claiming their dates as business expenses. The reason I know this is that James came back to his family's home begging. Begging like, please forgive me, while shouting these words. He came seeking my help, but his family was like, how dare you showing up? Don't you dare burden Emily anymore. Never show your face here again. And with that, my entire in-laws family chased him off. Just amidst all this, I found myself drawn to Liam, who is more reliable than anyone. Thank you for all the help. Well, it's only natural to want to help someone you love, right? Wait, what? Liam's face turned beet red, and seeing him like that made me blush too. Then I found out that Liam had had feelings for me for quite some time. Liam said, everyone seems to dislike it when I talk about my job, but only Emily really listened to me. Seen you appreciate my words, but you were my brother's wife, so I always thought I should keep these feelings hidden. At that, he looked down, and I found myself doing the same. Who would have thought he felt that way about me? To be honest, I'm not looking to be with someone like that right now. Figured that if you can wait a little, I want to respond to those feelings. He suddenly looked up at my words and beamed a radiant smile at me. Alright, I'm gonna give it my all to win you over. Oh, I'll brace myself then. By the way, our conversation was fully witnessed by his parents, and dinner was quite a feast. Finally, Liam has a girlfriend. Knock it off. Being his overjoyed mother, Liam blushed deeply and retorted. Looks about his father and exchanged glances, and laughed. Afterwards, I gave birth to a beautiful daughter, right on schedule. She's so adorable. Congratulations. She really looks like Emily, so cute. She's gonna be a heartbreaker. Oh man's gonna be able to resist. I wouldn't want to let her go.
And you're getting ahead of yourself.
I couldn't help but smile at Liam, who was fully in dad mode. Liam continued to be very supportive of me and was actively involved in child rearing. His parents were the same. Whenever I turned around, someone was always there looking out for my daughter, allowing me to raise her with peace of mind. And 100 days after finalized my divorce with James, I said I want to be her father. Please marry me.
You're getting ahead of yourself.
Oh, so dating first, right? Either way is fine with me.
His face lit up at my words.
However, this was repeatedly followed by some good-natured teasing from my mother-in-law, who had seen everything. Meanwhile, James, after being fired, paid back the money he owed me. He embezzled a lump sum. Part is, he borrowed from some shady folks. Oh, he's missing, taken away by some menacing-looking men. Well, wherever he is, whatever he's up to, I just wish him the best. My in-laws are over the moon with their granddaughter, showing no concern about James. Liam probably doesn't even remember James existed. Years later, I happily remarried Liam. Our daughter calls him Daddy, and Liam is absolutely smitten with her. In my belly, I'm carrying our second child. Our daughter is super excited about becoming a big sister. Now, the entire family is brainstorming names. Looks like our daughter's suggestion might win, though. I'm gonna make Emily, our daughter, and the new baby happy. You better include yourself in that too, you know? We plan to live happily ever after. Just all 6 of us living in harmony and having fun. That's the promise Liam and I have made. But we're looking forward to going out as a family once this baby is born. I changed the lock because the kid's noise is annoying. You can sleep in the garden with the baby. Coming back from a checkup with Rosetta, I called out to Kyle and was met with those unbelievable words. come on, Kyle. Stop joking and unlock the door now. Even with an appointment, enduring the long wait at the doctor's office since morning with my 3-month-old daughter, Rosetta, was tiring. Just as I thought we were finally home, I realized the key wouldn't fit. That was his response when I asked him about it.
I'm not joking. If you heard me, do as I said.
Rosetta is only a 3-month-old baby. How can you say such cruel things? 3-month-old baby. How can you say such cruel things?
I'm not joking. That's my line.
I come home exhausted from work, and all I hear is her constant crying.
She keeps crying even when I'm sleeping. It must be your fault.
Once the yelling escalated, no matter how hard I tried to block it out, his hurtful words kept reaching my ears. Even though Rosetta is our child, I felt tears welling up. Just as I was about to speak up, someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around and standing there was... Then a savior appeared for us. My name is Hannah O'Donnell. Get 4 years old. I gave birth to our beloved daughter, Rosetta, 3 months ago with my husband, Kyle, 28. I met Kyle at a mixer I was somewhat reluctantly invited to. Reluctantly invited by a friend. After his relentless pursuit, we started dating and eventually got married in our 2nd year. I became pregnant with our long-awaited child, Rosetta. Our first date was near a rosary, which was beautiful every year. That spot became our regular meeting point, so we named our daughter Rosetta. When I announced my pregnancy, Kyle cried tears of joy. I was filled with hope and anticipation for a bright future with him. Those were the days. Even during times of morning sickness and poor health, he would care for me without sleeping. However, as I entered my stable pregnancy period, Kyle's behavior began to change. I'm naturally petite and slender. The baby in my belly felt heavier than I anticipated, and even slight movements drained my energy. I wasn't exactly sighing, but I'd occasionally let out a small sigh after certain tasks. Seriously? Another sigh? Do you regret having our baby? No, Kyle. It's not a sigh. It's just the baby's heavy. Kyle mistakenly thought my slight exhales were sighs of regret, and no matter how many times I tried to explain, he wouldn't understand. From there, things became strained. He would come home late, not telling me where he was, and I spent anxious nights, especially as the due date approached. I see. I think Kyle's jealous of the baby, and that's why he's upset. Do you think so? He was head over heels for you, Hannah. Maybe he feels neglected. I'm sure he'll come around once the baby's born. Is that so? The one laughing and listening to my story is my sister, Rose. She's the one I rely on the most, and she's always been my greatest ally. Rose has a husband named Luke, who is 3 years older than her. Our family owns a traditional bakery in Nebraska. Luke, who fell in love with our bakery's pastries, insisted on apprenticing under our father, taking over after our mother passed away. Luke also fell for Rose and married her. He became a part of our family. Apparently, Luke's father is a CEO of a major company, but Luke had no intentions of taking over. Marrying Rose was okay. Officially, his family opposed the marriage, but now even his dessert-loving father has become a fan of our family's pastries. I haven't met Luke's father yet, but I've heard he's a strict businessman. Sorry for the detour, but I had been discussing Kyle's recent behavior with Rose. That said, I wasn't staying with my family. My traditional-minded father wasn't thrilled about my whirlwind romance that started at a mixer, so I kept my distance from my family home. For that reason, most of our talks were either when Rose visited me or via video chat. That day, as the baby was due soon, I received some traditional pastries and had Rose come over. Kyle had always enjoyed the pastries from my family's shop, so Rose was like, why not use these to get on his good side, and gave some to me. I received a cheer from Rose, saying good luck with making up. Aksavas was feeling well that day. I made some of Kyle's favorite dishes and planned to enjoy the pastries after dinner, setting them on a small plate and waiting for him to come home. Just around 9 o'clock, I heard the sound of the front door unlocking, and for the first time in a while, I went to greet him at the entrance. Welcome home, Kyle. A night, as I approached the entrance, I was taken aback. Kyle, completely drunk, was brought home by a group of men and women. Moreover, Kyle was clinging onto one of the women's shoulders. Kyle, we're here. Come on, let me go.
What a lovely house. It's so nice. She looked around curiously after laying Kyle down on the floor. Who are you? You scared me.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Why are you in Kyle's house? Oh, are you the housekeeper? Kyle, isn't that his wife we've heard about? Housekeeper? His wife we've heard about. Who are these people?
Sitting with my mind filled with questions, I tried to raise my voice just a bit. I'm Kyle's wife. It seems like you've brought my husband home. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, are you his colleagues? This to the woman, either misunderstanding or just not caring, glanced at me and started saying something. Oh, so you're the wife? Said you're quite the nag. Hey, stop that. Sorry about her. We're Kyle's team members. We went out for drinks and he got a bit too much. We'll be going now. Goodbye. The man, perhaps sobering up, quickly grabbed the woman's arm and hurried out. Even though I didn't think they were much younger than us, I was taken aback by how lacking in common sense these young people seemed to be. Though, when it comes down to it, Kyle, passed out drunk on the floor, was probably to blame. I prepared a glass of water and tried to wake Kyle up, and sneezed. Kyle, wake up! You catch a cold sleeping here? But all I got in response was some mumbling, and he showed no signs of waking up. Plus, with my baby bump, there was no way I could carry Kyle to the bedroom. So I fetched a blanket, covered him with it, left a note on the dining table saying heat it up if you're gonna eat, and decided to rest in our bedroom for the baby's sake. I must have fallen asleep soon after I hit the sack, because I don't remember anything after that. Because I was jolted awake by a loud noise. The sound came from the dining area, so I got up, holding my belly protectively, to see what was going on. But to my horror, the dinner I'd prepared for Kyle, as well as the pastries Rose had brought, were scattered messily across the floor. What time do you think it is? Making all that racket is going to bother the neighbors.
He said, still sounding drunk and slurring his words. I'm not saying you shouldn't drink, but our baby's coming soon. Remember?
That weren't you over the moon about it? What's gotten into you tonight? I made all your favorites and waited for you, and you go and make this mess. But my feelings didn't seem to get through to Kyle.
Enough, and stormed out.
We remained distant and misunderstood each other, and eventually I gave birth to our daughter, Rosetta. I wished he would remember the times when we first met. I named her Rosetta partly in hopes of that, but Kyle never held her. Rose was the one who was there for me during the delivery. Rose loves kids but couldn't have any of her own. That's why, taking a cue from Rose's name, I named our daughter Rosetta, hoping she would be loved by Rose as well. Rosetta has a heartwarming smile, and her laughter and smiles became my anchor. However, her crying at night was intense, and I often found myself protecting Rosetta from an enraged Kyle not getting a wink of sleep. Pips, if she cries and fusses in the middle of the night again, I'll kick both of you out. I got used to hearing such threats. But this can't go on. It's not fair to Rosetta. I had also prepared for the worst-case scenario in the back of my mind. 3 months passed since Rosetta was born, and today was her checkup. So I spent my morning in the waiting room of the clinic. After the checkup, I was completely drained from the lack of sleep, and I felt totally beaten. Rosetta, we're finally done, I said as we approached our front door. Apparently reached the front door and tried to unlock it. We did great, didn't we? Won't it fit? I tried to insert the key into the lock, but it wouldn't go in no matter how many times I tried. It just wouldn't open. It worked just fine when I left earlier. I reluctantly knocked on the door. I knew Kyle was home since it was his day off. Yes? Oh, Kyle? I said, sorry. For some reason, the key won't go in and I can't open the door. Can you help me out? What? You're back already? Just in time, I said. What are you talking about?
He changed the lock because the kid's noise is annoying.
You changed the lock? I asked, confused.
Just open up.
I pleaded. I want to get Rosetta some rest. No way, Kyle said. Didn't I tell you if she cried one more time, I'd kick you out? Come on, I said. Rosetta is just a 3-month-old baby. How could I possibly let her sleep outside? Enough, Kyle said coldly. Looks like I care, he added. I'm not gonna let that baby waste any more of my time. You and your inability to take care of her can just get lost. Frustrated, Kyle stopped talking to me. Hey, Kyle, I called out, ignoring my pleas. Kyle stopped talking to me. No matter how many times I knocked, he ignored it. Darn it, seemed he even powered off his phone. I couldn't even hear the ringtone anymore. This can't be happening, I thought, at a loss. Taken aback by what just happened, I needed to find a place for Rosetta to rest, so I started to walk away from the house. I can't go back to my parents, I realized. My father hasn't even seen Rosetta's face yet. If he found out I was locked out, who knows what he'd say? my trustworthy sister, Rose, had mentioned she'd be out at a meeting today, so I couldn't contact her. For now, I thought of taking refuge at a diner. However, exhausted from the lack of sleep, I stumbled.
Hey, lady. Are you all right? I promise I'm not a threat, he said. I was driving by and saw you stumbling. I got concerned and thought I'd check if you're all right.
Thank you, I replied. As I began to speak, tears started to stream down my face.
It seems like you're having some troubles, especially with a baby in your arms, he said. Come on, get in the car, he offered. I have my female secretary with me.
I can't believe this is happening, I thought as I got in the car. My embarrassment gave way to concern for Rosetta, and I recounted the whole incident to the man. The woman, whom he referred to as his secretary, handed me a handkerchief. At the same time, the man presented his business card.
I'm George O'Connor, the CEO here.
Mr. O'Connor, wait, what? Seeing his business card, my eyes widened in surprise.
Take care of this, okay?
Just when George said that to his secretary, she picked up something and nodded, saying, "Lake, certainly."
I decided to call Kyle again to negotiate.
Gee, stop calling. I've told you you're not coming back in. Just find some place to sleep with that kid.
As expected, he wasn't going to let us in. So I replied like this. All right, got it. Just remember, wherever we sleep, no complaints from you. At that, I hung up. We then began to drive away in George's car. If this is how you're gonna be, I won't hesitate for Rosette's sake. But to dull in my heart, I murmured, preparing for the worst-case scenario I had in mind. Hannah, are you okay? I'm so sorry. I should have come with you to the doctor's appointment. Looking frantic, Rose burst into the room. You should have called the shop. Rose, I'm so sorry for worrying you and for dragging Luke into this too. Don't say that. Rose's precious sister is also important to me. Having said that, the person who came with Rose was Luke. I was so surprised when I got the call from Dad. Thank you so much, George, for helping my sister and Rosetta. Oh, I never imagined that the person I'd called out to was Rose's sister, Hannah. Something turned out. The world is a small place. The man who approached me was none other than the father of Luke, the husband of my sister Rose. I was thinking of visiting with Rosetta once things settled down, but I never thought our first meeting would be like this. Since we Rosetta and I were, believe it or not, at George's place, for Rose, it's her father-in-law's house. I was brought to George's place by car, and they let Rosetta rest in a bed. While I was talking about my family, it turns out that Luke, who married Rose, is George's son. As George was passing by in a car to pick up some traditional sweets for his valued customers, and noticed me. So George contacted Luke, who then rushed over with Rose. So, is it true? Kyle locked you out of the house. Yeah. I can't believe he told me to sleep outside when Rosetta was there. Babies cry all the time. It's unacceptable. I nodded slowly. I told everything to Rose and Luke. Why would he go to the extent of changing the lock just to kick you out? Just to kick out Hannah and Rosetta. What do you mean? If he just wanted to get rid of you because of Rosetta's crying at night, he could have just put on a door chain, right? He's at work during the day, so you wouldn't run into him. Literally means he has a reason for not wanting Hannah and Rosetta in the room. If only we could see inside the room, we might get some clues. Oh, we can see the living room. There's a baby monitor camera I installed for Rosetta. Recalling, we all peered into the camera connected to my smartphone. What's this? So that's what's going on. How inappropriate. Just on the screen, Kyle was seen playing with a woman in a compromising position on the couch. I recognized that woman. She was the young lady who once introduced herself as Kyle's team member and brought a drunk Kyle home. I can't believe it. Blaming Rosette's crying at night and kicking us out for this. I was seething with anger and my body started to shake. I'll never forgive him. I've decided to take action against Kyle. It had been a week since Kyle kicked me out and I hadn't returned home when my cell phone rang. It was Kyle. I didn't want to hear that guy's voice, but I thought I might get an entertaining reaction, so I answered. Hello? Long time no talk. Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing? You call out of the blue and don't even greet me. That doesn't matter. Why the hell are you sending an attorney after me? Talking about divorce and paying compensation, have you lost your mind? Oh, you've heard from the attorney, right? And child support for Rosette? You'll be paying it until she turns 18. But of course the divorce comes first. Hold on. Why the sudden talk about divorce? You're the one who kicked us out. Yeah, I told you to get out, but I never said anything about getting a divorce. It's obvious that I would divorce you even without you saying it. I won't stay with a man who'd kick out his lovely daughter using the excuse of her crying at night just because he cheated. I never cheated. What evidence do you have? Are you stupid? The attorney is taking action because there's evidence. Don't think you can talk your way out of this. I'm not the same person who'd just listen and say nothing anymore. I firmly voiced my thoughts, asked the attorney to proceed with the divorce. At first, Kyle resisted, but with the evidence from the living room security camera and the confession from the other woman, he eventually accepted the divorce. We agreed to go through division of property. He also promised to pay the child support every month. If he fell behind, he agreed to pay the remaining amount in one lump sum as stipulated in our agreement. A while later, I got another call from Kyle. I've done my part for the divorce, all right. I'll pay the child support in no time. That's good to hear. Seems like you're quite confident about your finances, huh? Yeah. The CEO personally approached me the other day. He was like, I have something important to discuss with you soon. Man, my talent finally caught the attention of a major company's CEO. I'm definitely getting a promotion. Okay, so I'm saying goodbye to a shady woman like you with a child for good. I'll find a better woman and live the high life. And with that, Kyle continued to get carried away with his delusions that hadn't even come true. How could someone who's done wrong expect such good fortune? Well, as long as I could get what's owed to me, that's fine. I certainly didn't want to be with a loser like him. All I need is my lovely daughter, Rosette. Several months had passed since I divorced Kyle when I found myself in a certain place. And thanks for coming. What happened this time is unforgivable, both personally and for our company. I've looked into it thoroughly. Yes, I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience.
There's no need for you to apologize.
If anything, you're the victim here. That's so yuck. He'd make sure to witness everything.
As George finished speaking, there was a knock at the door. I see everything.
At George's deep voice, a man entered, grinning and rubbing his hands together. Mr. O'Connor, I've been eagerly waiting for your call.
It was my ex-husband, Kyle. He's standing by the entrance. Kyle gaped as he glanced further into the room. Why are you here? He was flustered, but I simply stood up in his direction. It was a cold, detached gesture. Long time. No see, Mr. Kyle O'Donnell. Remember, you're in front of the CEO. Why? His face turned pale, and he looked comically flustered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Let me explain. This is MS Hannah Johnson. She's the younger sister of my son's wife, Rose. Small world, huh? When I met George and saw his business card, I was shocked to see the name of Kyle's workplace on it. I was also surprised to learn that he was Rose's father-in-law. In short, I was in Kyle's boss's office. George had called me in, planning to exact retribution on Kyle for what he did to me and Rosetta. Moreover, you had an affair with your team member, and for such a disgraceful reason, got kicked. Reason for kicking out Hannah and your daughter, Rosetta, is despicable. I don't know what she told you, but I would never. Oh! So you're saying Hannah made up the affair? Yes, I would never do something so cruel. So you admit it's cruel? Of course. Then why did you tell me and Rosetta to sleep outside and change the lock? That was just a joke. But you took it seriously. You didn't even come back. Maybe you found another man. Enough. It's pathetic. Yes, George became furious and pulled out a voice recorder from his pocket, playing back a recording of Kyle berating me. You've been recording me? Isn't this eavesdropping? I'm going to sue you. My secretary recorded it. Plus, it's not eavesdropping. And after you kicked them out, they stayed at my place in my wife's room. I told you, right? Don't complain wherever we sleep. Come on. Seriously? What about my promotion? My raise? Oh, no way that's happening after you betrayed us by having an affair with a team member. That's not cheating because... Why don't you just accept it? George Mr. O'Connor saw the footage from the living room security camera. It was truly disturbing. And the woman you were with, Carol, admitted the affair and resigned. You pressured her into a relationship, didn't you? You said you felt lonely because your wife was cold to you, right? No way. My life's over.
Kyle's dumbfounded scream echoed throughout the CEO's office.
Thus, Kyle was personally reprimanded by the CEO, George, who is also my sister-in-law, anticipating a raise in promotion. Kyle walked into the CEO's office on cloud 9, only to find himself plummeting down to rock bottom. He had splurged his money on his affair partner, postponing the child support. As according to the contract, he needed to pay the child support properly. Come on, Hannah. We had something special. Let's give it another go, huh? I promise I'll take care of the kid this time. His talks of thinking we might reconcile, and he could avoid the payments. Kyle tried to turn the tables. How dare you? What do you mean by kid? My daughter's name is Rosetta. Well, don't ever contact me again. It was outrageous. Regretting that I married such a person, I felt frustrated, ashamed, and profoundly sad. Ignoring Kyle's desperate pleas on the other end of the phone, I pressed the end call button, blocking him. Later, my attorney informed me that Kyle's dismissal haunted him, preventing him from finding a new job, trying to borrow money to pay me. He couldn't get a loan from reputable sources. Instead, he borrowed from shady individuals. To pay his debt, he's working hard every day under their watchful eyes. I genuinely felt sorry for him. As for me, with the help of Rose and Luke, I managed to reconcile with my father and return to my family home. According to Luke, my father seemed to have been concerned about Rosetta and me, and he would quietly ask Luke, "How are they doing?" When Rose informed our father of the recent events, he was ready to confront Kyle in anger. When I returned with Rosetta after a long time, my father had a stern look on his face, standing imposingly. But when Rosetta gave him a bright smile, he said in a soft voice, "Nice to meet you. I'm your grandpa." He took her hand and, looking a bit shy, reached out for her, suggesting that I should let him hold her. We finally put our differences aside after years of not speaking. Now, my father's completely smitten with Rosetta, leaving his store in Luke's hands, buying toys and spending time playing with her. Thanks to this, I can now help Rose and Luke at the store. George and his wife started visiting us more frequently, helping to take care of Rosetta. It turns out they share some hobbies with my father, and they often hang out. Rose dotes on Rosetta, acting as a second mom to her. Even Luke claims, "I'm your dad," to Rosetta and showers her with affection. On days off, the four of us often go to parks. Brimming with love and care, Rosetta is growing up with a constant smile. I'm looking forward to watching Rosetta's growth, surrounded by my warm family. I live a contented life. Your land is now my land. I've already arranged for construction. What? The land is?
As I was about to speak, my mother-in-law interrupted with a shrill voice.
The wife shouldn't talk back to her husband. Just say understood and that's it. I didn't know how to respond to my mother-in-law, who looked so smug. A piece of land is already leased to a company, and a new apartment complex is planned to be built there. The land's rent is expected to be deposited next month. I'm sure I told Bob about this. My mother-in-law, about that land. Like I said, you just need to keep quiet. Got it? Every time I tried to speak the truth, my mother-in-law would shrilly interrupt. I finally lost my temper. Understood. supportance. I muttered curses under my breath as I looked at my satisfied in-laws and husband. Just wait and see. I can't wait to see them regret this. My name is Katherine Johnson. I'm a housewife who just turned 45. I studied abroad for about 2 years in college and have been an instructor at a Japanese conversation school for adults for over 23 years. Every day interacting with my students is very fulfilling. My husband, Bob, is also 45. We met when he enrolled as a student at my Japanese school. I never planned on getting involved with a student, and I always turned him down while he was still enrolled. But even after leaving the school, Bob kept pursuing me, and I finally gave in and we started dating. Bob was very gentlemanly during our dates and our relationship went smoothly. After about 2 years of dating, he proposed and we got married when I was 30. However, as soon as we got married, Bob changed his attitude completely and became very domineering. At first, we had many arguments, but I didn't have the energy or the spirit to fight every day. Eventually, I gave in most of the time, and it became the norm. Bob has a younger sister named Mary, who's 5 years younger than him. She didn't seem to visit her parents' home often. I met her once, and she seemed like a very efficient woman. According to Bob, she's arrogant and can't compromise just because she's a woman. Because of this, I hardly had any interactions with Mary, and I only saw her maybe once a year during the holidays. We've been married for 10 years, and I only saw her maybe once a year during the holidays. We've been married for 10 years, and even though I'm now 40, Bob and I haven't had any children. I once had a checkup at a women's clinic based on my in-laws' advice, and there was nothing wrong with me. Upsmore and Plan Bod's face turned livid and he yelled at me. Are you trying to say it's my fault? It's not like that. I tried to choose my words carefully, but an enraged Bob didn't listen. He threw the remote controller against the wall beside me. Don't you get cocky with me? I ain't ever going to a hospital. It's definitely something with you. Change the clinic. Never go to the previous one again. You got it? Bob said this, and grabbing just his wallet and cell phone, left the house. I picked up the broken remote controller, tears streaming down my face. That the married life I had dreamed of wasn't supposed to be like this. Perhaps the reason I didn't choose to divorce was because of the fond memories I had with the kinder side of Bob. At the age of 43, my in-laws told me that having a child at this age would look bad in society, and I had to give up the idea of having kids. When I told Bob about this, he just replied with a simple, "I see," showing no particular concern. It was then that I realized that I was the only one truly bothered by it. Bob and I lived about a 5-minute walk from my in-laws' house. His in-laws' house, and they would visit us about 3 times a week. To be honest, I wasn't fond of my in-laws. My mother-in-law kept making snide remarks, while my father-in-law would only talk about my looks and our intimate life. You know what they say, right? As women age, their eggs degenerate or something. I'm not saying yours are degenerating, Catherine, but once you're past 40, there could be complications, right? it'd be a hassle for us too, you know. It's all good, right? Even if they were degenerating, Catherine still got a fine figure. I bet Bob's still having a good time. Stop it, Dad. Nobody feels good having such crude conversations in front of them. I silently served tea, hoping that my in-laws would leave soon. You know, I had Bob when I was 20 and Mary when I was 25. I'm not saying younger is better, but younger women do tend to recover faster after childbirth, right? You sure were young, my mother-in-law. Well, not really. I mean, compared to other mothers of Bob's classmates, I might be on the younger side. I forced a smile at my mother-in-law, who was clearly pleased with just a bit of flattery. My mother-in-law always took pride in having had Bob at a young age, always wanting to show off how she was younger than others her age. And if someone didn't play along or contradicted her, she'd act as if they were in the wrong and treat them coldly. At Shun, I had to constantly flatter and play along with my mother-in-law's silent assertions whenever we met. Honestly, my mother-in-law's appearance wasn't that great. She was of average height and build, with curly hair, looking like any ordinary older woman you'd come across. She looked closer to 70 than her actual age, yet she seemed oblivious or maybe genuinely believed she was a hidden gem. Well, it's sad that we won't get to see a cute grandchild, but it's better than having another useless mouth to feed. Yeah, if they don't have kids, they'll probably take care of us in the future. The living room filled with crude remarks was so uncomfortable, even though it was my own home. And after my in-laws had their say, they always left with a sense of satisfaction. And one day I got a call from my father, but it was about my paternal grandfather passing away, and that I was set to inherit some of his estate. My father's family home was known as one of the prominent households in that area. My father, being the youngest of 6 siblings, never really inherited anything substantial and chose to live life doing what he wanted. Hence, my immediate family wasn't particularly wealthy. But since I was the only grandchild in the paternal lineage, my grandfather bequeathed a piece of land to me. The inheritance included that land and a sum of money that would cover any related expenses. Thus, even after paying the estate taxes, the amount left was substantial enough to make me pinch myself to check if I was dreaming. However, the plot was too large to simply build a house on, and I didn't have the confidence to use it wisely. I took actions. I discussed it with my father, and he suggested renting it out to a company looking to construct condos. The lease income alone would be enough to lead a comfortable life without worrying about its maintenance. Since this inheritance was unexpected and the land didn't hold sentimental value for the family, the decision to lease it to the company was easy. I informed my husband, Bob, about this. Bob seemed deep in thought for a while, but then simply said, "Got it," and went back to reading his book. I thought the matter was settled, but it seemed Bob had other plans in mind, which unexpectedly came to light one day. It happened on a day off when, as usual, my in-laws had invited themselves over to our place. At Shun, I was cleaning up in the kitchen. Bob suddenly called out to me while enjoying the tea and snacks I had prepared.
Your land is now my land. I've already arranged for construction, got it?
What? That land is already leased to a company that is planning to build condos on it. The lease money is to be deposited next month. I'd already informed Bob about this. My mother-in-law about that land. Like I said, you just need to keep quiet. Got it? Every time I tried to speak the truth, my mother-in-law would shrilly interrupt. I finally lost my temper, understood. Looking at my in-laws and Bob, who were smirking contentedly, I silently cursed them. You'll see. I can't wait to see the look on your faces when you realize I decided to act on something I had hesitated to do for a long time. I renewed my long-expired passport and reached out to a friend living abroad. When I told my friend about the situation, she was shocked but agreed to help. It was a bit challenging to carefully execute the plan before Bob found out about the land, but it felt worth it, thinking about my bright future.
You deceived me.
Holding back the urge to break down, I responded, "What are you talking about?"
It's about that land. The construction company called saying they can't take on the project because there's another construction plan in place.
Really? I thought I told you about it.
Also, about Tim, it's a wife's job to follow what her husband decides, right? Stop the condo construction plan right now.
You said you understood. I was too exhausted from work to deal with his selfishness. Bob grabbed me by the collar, trying to intimidate me. However, I wasn't afraid at all since I had everything prepared. It's impossible because I've already leased that land to a company. I told you, didn't I? The land is in my name, but the building on it is under the company's name. It's called a ground lease. I get paid for the land, and I don't interfere with the building. I explained it to you, but it seems you didn't get it. Bob seemed to not understand. He let go of me, looking completely dumbfounded. Looking him straight in the eyes, I continued, "So let's get a divorce." What, huh? How'd it come to this? Are you serious? Bob finally seemed to pick up on my simmering anger, and he quickly began to panic. Seeing his pitiful state, I moved to the living room. Bob, even though bigger than me, seemed so small as he cautiously followed me, keeping an eye on my every move. "Catherine, look, I'll respect your decision this time, but please reconsider the divorce, okay?" Despite everything, Bob still had the audacity to look down on me. I shot him a contemptuous glance. Bob seemed genuinely frightened by my gaze. Why should I need you, of all people, to respect decisions about the property I inherited? Well, you seem confused. That land is mine. I inherited it, but you have no say in it.
But the moment he heard he had no rights, he snapped. Hey, SIL, hey, that's downright disrespectful to your husband. Who do you think pays the bills here?
Well, we split all the living expenses and housing costs, so I'm living off my own dime. What? Didn't you notice? Or did you just not care? I took out our household ledger and opened it to the current month's page. Excited, Bob contributed $1,000, and I also put in $1,000, making it $2,000 for our living expenses. Additionally, The rent for our apartment and utilities come directly from my account. So even though I say it's 50-50, I'm the one paying more. As you can see, I can manage just fine on my own. Actually, it seems like I'm wasting money just by being with you. You take more than $2,000 for yourself each month, right? Up since our marriage, you've only contributed $1,000 to our home.
That's because Mom said it was enough.
There it is. Coach always with the mom thing. You're such a mama's boy. Mama's boy, Ups beamed, taken aback by my words, his eyes widening in surprise. To any onlooker, Bob, who always runs to his mother for everything and expects her to take his side, is clearly a mama's boy. But he seemed utterly clueless about it. Anyway, if you plan to keep living there, you'll have to pay for it yourself from now on. I've already changed the direct debit account. After today, I won't be paying even a cent. Wait, what do you mean you're leaving? Apurisi portscation. Ignoring Bob's protests, I grabbed the suitcase I had prepared earlier from the closet and headed for the front door. Actually, I've already moved my stuff out. Hectmate, I had been sneaking it out little by little so he wouldn't notice, but Bob had no clue. It made me a bit sad thinking he wasn't that interested in me, but to be honest, it was quite convenient. Bob followed me to the entrance, so I took off my wedding ring right in front of him and placed it on top of the shoebox. Are you really leaving? You'll regret this. Staying together would be the real regret. What about my meals? Make your own food? I was utterly exasperated that Bob was concerned about his meals at this point. Bob looked like he thought it was a given, but when I snapped back at him, he looked absolutely stunned. I didn't want to see his face for even a second longer, so I left the house I had lived in for 15 years. For the next few days, I was busy preparing for the next chapter in my life, running around handling various errands and paperwork. Then I received a call from my mother-in-law. Reluctantly, I answered the phone and was met with a shrill voice coming through the cell phone. What on earth? Just building an apartment on that land. And after all I've done, taking care of you and Bob for 15 years without a child, and now you're divorcing him? How ungrateful. My mother-in-law, the apartment was already decided. The divorce is because Bob and I couldn't build trust. And the reason we didn't have children is because Bob didn't fully cooperate with the fertility treatments. He's perfectly healthy. That's strange, so am I. At my words, my mother-in-law shrieked in frustration on the other end, and I couldn't help but chuckle at the cartoonish way she yelled. Anyway, I'll be suing you for damages, for deceiving us and for breaking Bob's heart. You better make amends. All you talk about is Bob. Give him back his ring and keep clinging to him. As for the damages, I might talk to Bob about that. My lawyer will contact you soon, so don't run off, okay? Pass that message along. The nerve of you. My mother-in-law kept yelling, but I hung up without a second thought. I was amazed at how much a person can say when they finally let go of their inhibitions. It felt as though a weight that had been on my chest for years had finally lifted a bit, giving me a sense of relief. Just a month after leaving the house, it was finally time to discuss the divorce. My lawyer told me the basic terms were set, but Bob refused to sign the divorce papers unless he saw me. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet him at a restaurant. My in-laws insisted on meeting at their home, but I repeatedly refused and booked a private dining room at a restaurant. When I got to the rendezvous, my in-laws and Bob were there, all smiling unnaturally. I had a gut feeling they were up to something.
It's Catherine, long time no see. He said, "How have you been?"
Yeah, I've been good, thanks. As I replied, my mother-in-law approached with a grin, speaking in a sweet, cloying voice. "Catherine, dear, I'm sorry for the past. Let's talk about the future," she said. "Sounds good." From her words, I got a vague idea of the scheme she and Bob and my in-laws were up to. Probably something like, Bob is going to divorce, so give us a percentage of the rent money or something. And sure enough, as soon as my mother-in-law sat down, she began talking about the inheritance I'd received. "Do you know the current market value of that land over in, say, New Jersey?" she asked. "Well, yes," I replied. "I was blown away." "And you've been getting some money elsewhere too, right?" she asked. "We need to settle the division of assets properly." I couldn't help but laugh at her brazen words. Design in me burst into laughter. At first, my mother-in-law looked stunned, but her face quickly turned beet red with anger. "What's so funny?" she asked. "You don't know, do you?" Atmek trains. "The inheritance I received isn't considered marital property." My mother-in-law exclaimed in shock, eyes wide open. "So, you're saying you won't get a single cent?" she asked. "That's right," I replied. At my words, my mother-in-law let out a silent scream and slumped in defeat. Judging from my mother-in-law's attire, she had plans to live the high life on my inheritance. Overhearing her mumble about how to make the payments was proof enough. Don't you want to support your husband's family as a good wife should? My father-in-law, who had been silent until now, chimed in. Silent until now, I interjected, to which I threw him a cold glare. I silently pressed a button on my smartphone, from which played a recording of my father-in-law's own crude words. What the hell? I don't need a father-in-law who talks to me like that, a mother-in-law who goes along with it, or a husband who turns a blind eye. I'm going to live my own life. You think you can just do whatever you please. If you want, we can even take this to court. We'll just present this as evidence anyway. If you do that, it'll ruin me. Well, it'll be a social disaster for you, wouldn't it? My father-in-law was speechless, and just like my mother-in-law, he hung his head in defeat. Finally, with the noisy peanut gallery silenced, I looked over at Bob. Even though Bob's face had turned pale, he suddenly seemed to have an idea. "I bet managing the money is hard for you alone, so I'll help you out." "Okay, just do whatever you like. Get to why I did civils. I don't understand why I need to involve you in my life even after the divorce. Plus, I have someone who'll genuinely help me decide how to use the inheritance." "Come in," I beckoned. At my beckoning, the door opened, and a woman walked in, Bob's eyes widened in shock upon seeing the woman. Mary was in per sexury excess. But turns out, while I was planning with a friend, I discovered that Mary knew that friend. According to what my friend told me, my in-laws always favored Bob and were incredibly hard on Mary. Upset her perspective, Bob not only accepted the situation where he was the only one benefiting, but he also often shifted the blame for his actions onto Mary, showing his cunning side. In the end, Bob went to a private high school and college, but Mary was only allowed to go to a public high school and didn't get any financial help for college. So Mary worked to pay her own college fees, and after graduation, she became a freelance writer on her own. But as soon as her career started taking off, my in-laws began pestering her to send money home. This coincided with when Bob and I got married, so I was surprised when I was told she was wary of us too. Since then, Mary and I have been in touch and cleared any misunderstandings. We've become what you could call best friends. Mary and I hit it off really well. She's going to help me start an English language school abroad. Abroad, what can you possibly do overseas? Didn't you forget my profession? I've studied abroad for 2 years and have been speaking Japanese with native speakers at work every day. I have no issue using Japanese, and had I not married you, I would have gone overseas much earlier. What's gonna happen to me? I can't speak Japanese. Do you understand what divorce means? It means I've chosen to not live with you anymore. Oh! It seemed like Bob finally grasped the situation. His face went from pale to ghostly white. I took the filled-out divorce papers from the silenced Bob, left the 3 of them sitting there lifelessly, and exited the restaurant with Mary and my attorney. After that, I filed the divorce papers. Then I moved overseas. I'd already sent my belongings to my new place, so I was able to start my new life without any problems. I'm sharing a home with Mary, and we're able to live together while respecting each other's jobs. Mary has been gaining popularity as a freelance writer, penning columns about living abroad and writing articles about America for local publishers. Turns out, Mary's dream is to become a novelist. Seeing her work hard on her stories in her free time, I feel like I need to step up my game. Bob, who used to live with me in our old apartment, apparently had to move out because he didn't have any savings due to his frivolous lifestyle. He couldn't make ends meet. He moved back with my in-laws, but without financial help from Mary, they are taking most of his salary. Not only does he have no discretionary money, but he also seems to be worn out doing all the housework that my mother-in-law gave up on. It seems that my in-laws are also on the verge of having to sell their home. They sent numerous messages to Mary asking for money, but Mary just laughed and said drop dead before hanging up. I think my mother-in-law, who's only 65, should really consider working. But given she's never held a job before, there aren't many places willing to hire her. Moreover, I doubt she'd even choose to work. So their family home might be gone in the not-so-distant future. As for me, I've opened the English language school I always dreamed of, and thankfully, it's thriving. My students are incredibly passionate, always filled with hope and saying they're going to visit America someday. Well, today we're going to study greetings. Every day I stand in front of the class with a smile. I'm brimming with hope for the future, and I absolutely love the confident person I've become.